Hey guys, I'm back with another little wet into wet tutorial. We're going to do a very simple illustration today of some grass. And I already went ahead and sketched it. You're going to need a cup of clean water, ideally too. And the colors I'm using today are Winsor Newton Green Gold, Daniel Smith Quinn Gold. Thank you so much, Kabocha, for sending that. Daniel Smith Undersea Green, and Daniel Smith Lunar Black, and I may also end up using some Daniel Smith Burnt Sienna. You don't have to use those colors, of course, for this tutorial. Those are just the colors that I'm using. And I've got 3 brushes on my table. I've got a synthetic cat's tongue, I've got a synthetic round 10, and I've got a squirrel hair round 6. I may need a smaller brush. If that's the case, I'll have to grab it. So the first thing I want to do is, and I am working on top of a Ranger Ink Essentials craft mat. So this is a non-porous surface, and I can put my watercolor, tube watercolor paints right down on top of it if I so desire. No problem there. You may also want to go grab a paper towel. I'm going to demonstrate a few different watercolor techniques today. And hopefully this is simple enough that it will inspire you guys to do a little bit of painting on your own. So I went ahead and I put a dot of each color. That's probably overkill. I probably don't need nearly as much as I put down. And the first thing I want to do is I want to do a gradiated wash with the Lunar Black. And I'm using Lunar Black because it has sedimenting properties to it. So, added a lot of water, and this is a very drippy brush. So the first thing I'm doing is I am applying a wash to about half of the paper. Then I'm going to create a thirsty brush by dabbing out the excess paint. And then quickly, I want to get in that green, or I'm sorry, that Quinn Gold. And starting from the bottom, I want it to blend into my Lunar Black. Fix the camera a little bit. I'm going to grab some more of that Lunar Black, hopefully a little more concentrated. And starting at the top, I'm going to brush it on while it's still wet. So we're working wet into wet, and I want to find something to prop this up. So I'm going to grab an eraser. You guys have seen me do that trick before. That way, gravity will pull our paint downward now. Got a big spot that needs to be blended out. And dipping it into the water, I'm going to blend those two again, and then I'm going back into the Quinn Gold and brushing it here on the bottom, so at the foreground. And I am working on fluid easy block paper, so it's a cellulose based paper, so unfortunately for me it dries very quickly. Alright, next step, I'm taking my paper towel and I just want to try and dab out some of the gray to make clouds like I showed you guys in that cloud tutorial, but since I have it there, it should work a little better. And I'm not super satisfied with those, so I'm going to go ahead, mix up some more Lunar Black. And just kind of go into it here and there. That works a little bit better. As you can see, paper had a chance to dry over here. So cleaning my brush off and wiping away some of the excess water. Just gonna help it blend a little bit and grab some more of the black, even more concentrated, and just kind of dab that in so we get kind of a mottled sky that diffuses out. All right. Using the round 6 squirrel, I'm going to go into the green gold. And hopefully working wet into wet. I'm just going to dab that on. I wish the quin gold was still wet so it would sort of bloom out into this. Unfortunately, if I want it to do that, I'm going to have to go change my water out. That's okay. And then some down here at the bottom, which is still wet. One of the neat things about green gold is it's a shading color. So as it gets more saturated, almost turns into a different color completely. It goes from a very chartreuse sort of green to a darker green. Now we're going to grab some of that undersea green. And again, working wet into wet, we're going to dab it in sort of at the bottom of our grass stalks at this stage. And you guys can see the lunar black is starting to sediment out a little bit. That was an intended effect. I wanted sort of a muddy gray sky. Murky might be the better word. Then I'm going to go into the quin gold. Sort of add some shadows, so we're doing wet over dry here, but I'm also touching it up against our grass so it's flowing into the grass, unless the grass has pooled water, and then it's flowing into the gold. So we're going to get some interesting variety of color. And wet into wet sketches can be a lot of fun because you can do a lot of painting without waiting for the watercolor to dry. You just have to work quickly. So I was going wet over dry in the sky a little bit. I'm blending it out with a little bit of water. I want my most intense color at the top. And I'm dabbing some more saturated color here into the wet area so that it will diffuse and gives it kind of a brooding color, which I like. And then I'm going to go into that undersea green again. And lightly brush it into certain areas. And then I'm going to let this have a chance to dry, and then I'm going to work wet over dry. So this is what we have so far. Pretty different once it's dried, right? I'm going to go in with that green gold, and I'm going to work a lot more saturated, so I'm mixing a lot of green gold in with just a little bit of water. I'm going to go ahead, tighten up some of that grass, delineate it a little bit better. So we're working dry over wet. I mean, wet over dry. Some people would even call this dry, because what they mean when they say dry over dry is very, very little water on top of a dry piece of paper. So we're working pretty concentrated here on a dry piece of paper. But my squirrel hair brushes hold a lot of water. They're very, very thirsty. So I wouldn't necessarily consider that dry over dry, because I'm not getting any dry brushing. I'm not getting any line breaks, which are kind of typical hallmarks for when you're working dry over dry. And you can work with a smaller brush than this to do your grass detailing. And go over here and do the same thing. Just trying to be loose and gestural. You don't have to use a round. You can use whatever kind of brush you're comfortable with for this sort of thing. My preference is a round. That's what I paint the majority of Cara pages using. But you could use all kinds of different effects brushes, flats held at an angle, even a fan brush that's all splayed out would work for this. And you guys can see how where it blurred out or blended out, it kind of makes it look like it's fading off into the background. I'm going to grab some of the undersea green. This might be too thirsty of a brush. We're going to do the same thing, working over the areas that are wet as well as the areas that are dry. That way we're going to get a blended effect, and we're keeping our undersea green mainly towards the bottom of the plant. And we're allowing the colors to blend and mix on the page. Alright, so I'm going to give this a chance to dry. Alright, I'm pretty pleased with how this little piece is turning out. I just want to go in and add some final, and I'm mixing my marine green very dark. Wet over dry. Now see, this is almost dry over dry because I'm working with it pretty thickly. And then I think, once I have done this, I think I might do some low lights on the sand, the Quin Gold sand, with a little bit of this marine green, and that should contrast nicely with the gold and look good. And what's nice about this little tutorial is you really don't need a lot of drawing. So we're mixing the marine green very thin now. You don't really need a lot of drawing ability at this point to render a decent little illustration. Okay. I'm not even working from reference, but you certainly can. Working from reference is a great way to develop not only your own style, but some muscle memory. All right. We're gonna draw some of it out like that. All right. And we could even go in with white gouache, which I think I'm gonna do, and just kind of pick out some highlights on that grass. So I am going to grab a very fine natural hair brush and get right back. And I grabbed some P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, which is not technically gouache, but it's very easy to work with. And I grabbed a acrylic synthetic. And this I'm basically going to work dry over dry, because I am adding very little water, just enough so that it'll go down on the paper. So if I add a little water, I can get a neat little splatter effect there, kind of break up make it almost look like little white flowers. And I'm just tapping my brush. And I want to keep this really at a minimum, because if you do this too much, it becomes noticeable and then it looks like you overworked your piece. And that is something I think a lot of my work suffers from, is I overwork it. So I'm just very, very lightly brushing in some of this opaque white paint. I think we're done with this. So, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today while we painted this little beachside or dune side scene with the ominous sky and the sedimenting black. That is lunar black, in case you like that effect. Please check out some of my other watercolor tutorials here on this channel and also on natosoup.blogspot.com in my Watercolor Basics series. I hope you guys will look forward to future watercolor tutorials, and if there's ever a technique you'd like to see me demonstrate in detail, let me know in the comments below. I am always looking for suggestions. I hope you guys have a great day, and I hope to see you again really soon. Bye guys!